My name is Clara Whitmore. I gave 23 years of my life to the United States Marine Corps, the last 5 serving as a major general. I've commanded operations most civilians wouldn't even be able to read about, cradled wounded soldiers in my arms, and signed the kind of letters no commander ever wishes to write. Yet nothing, not Kandahar, not evacuations under fire, not even the moment they placed the Valor Cross on me while I lay in a hospital bed, nothing prepared me for the feeling of coming home. It was my mother's 65th birthday. The celebration was held in the Hawthorne Room, Eversted's idea of refined elegance. When I entered alone, every head turned, only to quickly look away again. My father gave me that familiar, worn half-smirk, the same one I remembered from when I was 13 and tracked mud into the house. My sister Isabel clinked her wine glass and said, just loud enough for everyone to hear, Well, look who made it. I didn't realize they still invited you to these things." Her husband laughed quietly behind his bourbon. My mother avoided my gaze. No one stood. No one offered me a seat. I remained standing a moment too long before finally sitting myself in the only open chair near the kitchen doors, close enough to catch the smell of burnt garlic and dish soap. No one asked how I had been. Someone even joked about whether I had started looking for grocery store jobs now that I was retired. I said nothing. I simply sat there with a faint smile, letting everything simmer beneath my skin. What they didn't know was that I had just declined a classified role at the Pentagon because I refused to approve a weapons contract I didn't trust, that I still carried a bullet scar beneath my collarbone, and that just last week I had signed papers to take in the daughter of a man who died under my command. And just as dessert was being served, a new voice cut through the sound of clinking glasses, firm, controlled, and unmistakably military. "Excuse me," he said, stepping toward our table. "Ma'am, welcome back, Major General Whitmore. You could have heard a fork drop." I hadn't returned to Eversted in more than 14 years. 14 years filled with combat zones, sunrise briefings, and long nights spent writing names into condolence letters. I had crossed minefields in Kandahar and sat in silence with mothers who asked why their sons hadn't made it home. And now here I was, walking into the Hawthorne Room in the only pair of heels I still owned, wearing a simple navy dress, my hair pinned up out of habit. No one truly noticed. The hostess glanced at her tablet and asked, "You're with the Whitmore party?" As if my presence was an afterthought. She guided me to the far end of the candlelit table, right beside the swinging kitchen doors, where a chill swept through every time they opened. I sat quietly. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. "She's back." I thought she was still overseas. "Still not married, huh?" I lifted my glass of water and looked through it like a lens, hoping the voices might fade if I held it there long enough. But they didn't. They never did. My sister Isabel made her usual dramatic entrance, arriving just late enough to capture everyone's attention. Dressed in a crimson gown, her hair styled in soft waves, heels sharp as stilettos, she walked straight to the head of the table and kissed the mayor's cheek as if they were close relatives. "It's such an honor," she said brightly, "to lead New Horizons into its next phase." She didn't even glance in my direction. Our mother stood to deliver her speech, her voice carrying clearly over the murmurs and clinking cutlery. She spoke about family's strength and blessings, praised Isabel's nonprofit, congratulated Cousin Reed on his acceptance into med school, and proudly mentioned a 5-year-old spelling bee win. But she said nothing about the daughter, who had carried the American flag on her shoulder across 3 continents. I raised my glass anyway, just to keep my hands occupied. A great aunt leaned toward me, adjusting her bifocals. "What do you do in the military, dear? Logistics, rations, or something with supplies?" I smiled politely. "Something like that." She nodded, content with the answer. The truth would never have fit into her version of patriotism, and honestly, I was too exhausted to make myself smaller for their comfort. After the cake was served and the small talk faded, Isabel finally approached me. She leaned in, all charm and pretense, and whispered, "You really shouldn't have come." Mom didn't want the vibe tonight to feel overshadowed. I didn't reply. I simply looked at her. The same girl who once begged me not to leave for basic training, then never wrote back once I did. The same girl who copied my homework in school and then blamed me when we were caught. Somehow, she still believed she had the right to define my absence. I stayed silent because I knew the version of the story she was telling was about to unravel. They didn't realize it yet, but something was coming, something undeniable. The next morning, the motel room smelled faintly of bleach and air conditioning, and nothing else. No one had offered me a place to stay. Not out of politeness, not even out of image. The only message on my phone came from my father. "Thanks for coming. Your mother's tired, not up for visitors." I left the phone face down on the nightstand and walked out into Aversted's two familiar streets. I didn't have a plan, just a need to breathe in air that wasn't perfumed by the past. But this town had a way of steering you toward things you didn't ask for. 2 blocks later, I found myself standing in front of New Horizons, Isabel's boutique nonprofit/brand. The display window was covered with a life-sized promotional banner. And there she was, standing proud in a tailored navy uniform dress with brass buttons and heels, a bronze star medal pinned neatly to her chest. Except it wasn't just any medal. It was the old bronze star design, the one that had been recalled over a decade ago because of an engraving flaw. It was never meant to be distributed. The only way someone would have one was if it had been discarded or stolen. And there she was, wearing it like it was a part of her outfit. Beneath the photo, the caption read, "From family legacy to civic duty." That's when I remembered her words from the night before, said half-laughing to a guest over champagne. "My sister tried the military thing, but it wasn't for her. I learned from her mistakes." I stood there, my mouth dry, stomach cold. I didn't go inside. I just turned away and walked down the block toward the place I used to know as home. My father's bookstore still had the same dusty smell, the same brass bell that jingled when the door opened. On his desk was a framed certificate, my name on it under a fake rank, next to a photo cropped just right to cut off every ribbon. I picked it up. He walked in from the back room, stopped when he saw it, and said nothing. "Why?" I asked. He sighed. "Your mother didn't want people to think of you as someone who's killed people. Isabel fits better. She's public-friendly." I didn't say a word. I just folded the certificate once and slipped it into my coat pocket. I didn't plan to attend Isabel's fundraising gala, but after the bronze star in the window and the forged certificate on my father's desk, something inside me itched, not with anger, but with clarity. I needed to see what story she was telling next. The Everstead Country Club ballroom was dressed to impress. Crystal chandeliers, polished floors, a jazz quartet in the corner, and a curated guest list full of smiles, too white to be real. I checked the seating chart and, as expected, found myself at table 12, conveniently placed between the restroom doors and a service cart station. The woman across from me scrolled through her phone the entire time. The man beside me was already on his second bourbon, humming off-key with the band. I didn't mind. They left me alone. Halfway through the night, a man in a navy suit stepped on stage, tall, silver-haired, and self-assured. Elliot Crane, Isabel's largest backer, the kind of man who smiled with his chin. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate resilience and vision. Isabel Whitmore represents a future unburdened by the darker chapters of the past. Even with a family name once marked by military scandal, she has risen above." His words hit like shrapnel. Scandal? I had never been investigated. But I remembered the rumors, old whispers from Kandahar. I was medevaced mid-mission after catching shrapnel during a rescue op. Some believed I had abandoned my post. I had already submitted my report. It had been reviewed and cleared, and I assumed that was the end of the matter. Apparently, it wasn't. I quietly slipped away from the table, my heels making no sound against the polished marble hallway. All I needed was a moment, a breath of air, a pause away from the noise and speculation. But just as I approached the catering door, I heard muffled voices behind it. 2 women. One of them said, "Isabel, she never defends herself." "That's the best part," the other replied. "Crane says if we ever need to shut things down, that old letter she wrote will be enough, the one about her squad mate. It proves she covered for someone. That's all we need." The color drained from my face. There was only one letter they could have been referring to, the one I had written while lying in a hospital bed. The same letter that protected Captain Miles Bennett. I had buried it, just like I buried the guilt that came with it. Now I knew someone had uncovered it and was using it. Back at the motel, I sat alone in the dark, surrounded only by the low hum of the air conditioner and the heaviness pressing against my chest. I hadn't thought about that letter in years. I had written it while still under the haze of morphine, gauze wrapped tightly around my ribs, my boots still stained with blood. It wasn't a confession, it was a choice. A decision I made to protect a man who didn't deserve to be sacrificed to bureaucracy. Captain Miles Bennett. On that day in Kandahar, he made a split-second call, diverting the evacuation route to save a group of civilians, even though it meant breaking protocol. It worked. Lives were saved. But it wasn't clean, and someone had to take responsibility. That someone should have been me. So I wrote the letter. I told Command it had been my order. I took the blame and shielded him. He died a week later. Now Isabel or Crane had that letter, and they were treating it like ammunition. I pulled my deployment trunk from the motel closet. It was dented, coated in dust, and still carried the faint scent of sand and diesel. My hands trembled more than I cared to admit as I opened it. Beneath rolled-up fatigues and an old field manual, I found a worn folder. Inside was the original letter, my draft, written in my own hand. Beneath it lay something wrapped in cloth. The Silver Falcon. It was a small insignia pin, no larger than a thumbprint. Miles had given it to me the night before that mission. "You're the one who'll do the right thing," he had said, "even if it burns." I turned it over, my fingers tracing the smooth metal surface. That's when I felt it, a faint seam. My heart started pounding. I took out my knife and carefully pried open the back. Inside was a microSD card. I stared at it for a long moment before sliding it into my laptop's reader. It took a few seconds to load. Then a folder appeared on the screen. Kfield_confidential. There were 3 audio files. I clicked play. A calm, steady voice spoke. "The manifest says medical supplies. But we both know that crate contains ordnance. We move it before the UN sweep. No questions asked." Then another voice, familiar, urgent. "Miles. You can't run weapons through a shelter zone. There are families, their kids." In that instant, I understood. Miles hadn't just died in war. He had died because he stood in someone's way. The National Veterans Conference in Chicago was a blend of medals, memories, and intense media attention. Flags lined the entrance. Protesters shouted behind barricades. Some held signs that read, "Let the truth speak." Others accused people like me of betrayal. I walked through it all with my head held high and my hands steady. Colonel Ray Sanderson met me backstage. He didn't waste time. "If you back out now, Whitmore," he said quietly, "they'll tell the story without you." I nodded. No stage could shake me more than the battlefield ever did. The lights in the auditorium dimmed as I stepped onto the stage, dressed in a simple black suit. No ribbons, no decorations. Just my name and the truth I carried. "I used to believe honor was something given to you," I began. "But war teaches you otherwise. Honor is what you choose to protect, even when no one else will." I pressed a button. The screen behind me came to life. First, Kandahar. Images of smoke, shattered buildings, civilians being pulled from the ruins. Then the audio began. Miles's voice echoed through the hall. "You can't run weapons through a shelter zone. There are families, their kids." Then the third file played. "If I don't make it," Miles said, his voice unsteady but resolute, "tell Whitmore. She'll know what to do." I stood still, allowing the silence to settle over the room. Then, from the side of the stage, a figure stepped forward, dressed in full military uniform, adorned with honors. A legal officer. "This recording has been verified," he announced. "General Clara Whitmore is not under investigation. She is a federally protected witness." A beat of stunned silence. Then one hand clapped, then another, and suddenly the entire room was on its feet. A reporter near the front called out, "General Whitmore, what do you say to those who accuse you of surviving while others didn't?" I looked straight into the crowd. "I survived," I said. "And I've used that survival to say what the dead can't." As I stepped down, I saw in the last row my mother standing, tears streaming down her face. My father next to her, hand over his heart. But I didn't stop. Didn't wait for their redemption. Because this wasn't about being welcomed back. This was about never letting them bury the truth again. 2 days later, Elliot Crane's name exploded across every major news outlet. Veterans scandal uncovered. Illegal arms deal tied to nonprofit donor. Headlines ran faster than his lawyers could spin. By morning, footage of his arrest, gray suit, handcuffed outside his Westbridge estate, circulated like wildfire. The Department of Justice called me just after noon. "You're now classified as a federal whistleblower," the agent said. "Stat 11B protection. You'll be monitored for retaliation. You did the right thing, General." It should have felt like victory. Instead, it tasted like something heavier. Justice comes late and never clean. When I returned to Everstead, the sky was overcast, thick with the kind of gray that made everything look older. My parents had invited me over. First time in years they'd asked anything of me. The house was the same. Same carpet stains, same 2 soft couch cushions, but the silence was different. My mother spoke first. She didn't try to hug me, just folded her hands in her lap and looked at the floor. "I was afraid," she said. "Afraid of how far you'd gone. Afraid you wouldn't come back. So, I started grieving before you even left." Her voice cracked mid-sentence, but she didn't stop. "I thought if we pretended you were something simpler, something softer, we wouldn't have to explain the hard parts. We wouldn't have to admit we were never brave enough to follow you." My father didn't speak. Instead, he stood, walked to the wall, and took down the forged military certificate, the one with the made-up title and half-truth photo. He looked at it for a moment, then tore it in two. No drama, no speech. Just truth, finally unwrapped. "I didn't have the courage to stand with you," he said, his voice like gravel. "But I see now it was your courage that kept standing for all of us." I didn't cry. I didn't rush in to forgive them, but I nodded once, because sometimes silence says more than an apology ever could. I found Isabel in her office 2 days later, or what was left of it. The walls were bare, the shelves were empty. Her laptop sat closed beside a cardboard box of desk photos and framed quotes that suddenly rang hollow. She didn't look up when I entered, just sat on the edge of her chair, shoulders hunched like the weight of it all had finally found her. "They pulled everything," she said quietly. "The board, the grants, the endorsements. Someone leaked that the metal in my pitch deck was fake." She let out a breath that sounded like it hurt. "I didn't think it mattered. I just wanted Mom to look at me the way she looks at you." She finally raised her eyes. "But I forgot what you had to survive to earn that look." Her voice cracked. "I gave them the letter. I didn't even read the whole thing. I just skimmed it. Crane's people said it was background vetting. I didn't know what they'd do with it. I didn't know it would destroy you." I didn't speak for a long time. Then finally I said, "You don't need to be me, Isabel. You just need to stop turning other people's wars into your stage." There was no venom in my voice, just clarity. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself. She just nodded as if maybe for the first time she finally saw the line between admiration and theft, and that she had crossed it. 3 months later, the Marcus Bennett Veterans Resource Center opened its doors on the edge of Everstead. The town that once overlooked me now stood still, shoulder to shoulder beneath flags and early morning light. The ceremony was quiet, intimate, exactly what Miles would have wanted. Inside the entrance, a glass case held a silver falcon pin, polished but worn. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Proof of survival. Promise to speak." I stood in full uniform, not for recognition, but for remembrance. Beside me, Lily, Miles's daughter, held a framed photo of her father. She didn't speak, but her presence was louder than any speech I could have given. Toward the back, I saw Isabel. No press, no camera crew, just her. A white blouse, hands folded, eyes steady on mine. And this time, she didn't look away. A reporter asked, "General Whitmore, after everything, what matters most to you now?" I looked at Lily, at the plaque, at the people who had finally chosen to see. "That this place stays standing," I said. "That the truth stays standing with it."